Now, this morning, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport has released their report into racism in cricket following the Azeem Rafiq hearing. The DCMS committee's report urges the government to limit public funding for the game unless there is obvious progress on getting rid of racist behaviour from clubs and among spectators. The MPs found there was, quotes, deep-seated racism within the sport and called on the ECB to provide updates to them on its progress or face a cut in money being made available to them. We'll hear from the committee chairman Julian Knight in a moment and get reaction from the ECB chief executive Tom Harrison. But first, BBC Sports editor Dan Rowan has more details on today's report.
The committee began an inquiry after Yorkshire sparked outrage by taking no disciplinary action despite finding that Azeem Rafiq had experienced racial harassment at the county. The MPs praised the former player for highlighting a wider problem in the sport. The report says attempts to discredit the whistleblower in the media showed cricket faced a long and difficult road. It's evident, the committee concluded, that there's a deep-seated issue of racism. MPs urged the government to make future public funds dependent on continuous progress in getting rid of racism. While Yorkshire have had an overhaul of staff since losing sponsors and international hosting rights over the crisis, the ECB has published an action plan to tackle what it called the earthquake of further allegations at other counties. Along with Rafiq, both organisations welcomed the report and vowed to provide the committee with regular updates to try to rebuild trust.
That's our sports editor Dan Rowan, who's been speaking to the DCMS chairman Julian Knight. And Dan asked him how his committee proposed that cricket gets its house in order.
First of all, I think that it's clear to me that this isn't just a matter of racism in Yorkshire cricket, it's racism in English cricket. And I think the ECB's own figures show that since they launched their information line, their whistleblowing line, up to 4,000 complaints have been made. And the number of stories that we have been told as a committee and as committee members, often by whistleblowers, and we continue to be told by people every day, indicates this is a much wider spread problem than just Yorkshire. So therefore it needs a game-wide approach. For me, that means very simply that the ECB needs to come up with clearly defined targets and goals that must be achieved, and they need to give quarterly updates to the committee to ensure that those goals are being achieved. For me, that would include things like how many younger players of South Asian origin are making it through into counties. We know there is a massive drop-off, and they have known as well, the game has known since the Fletcher report in 2014, that there is a huge drop-off in the number of South Asian kids starting the game, but not finishing the game, if you like, in the professional ranks. So there is one metric that needs to be sorted, but more than that as well, we need a completely open and honest and transparent approach to the issue of racism and how they deal with complaints. And only by doing that can, I believe, the game of cricket rehabilitate its shattered reputation.
And if such criteria are not met, Julian, what then? What should happen then?
Well, first of all, we said that they should be linked to public money. So any grants from Sport England, etc., or any form of governmental grant should be dependent upon the ECB showing that it has not only just established these metrics and these measures and targets, but is also actively looking to achieve them. If that also doesn't happen, it's only just a question of money, but we could potentially look at an option down the line of establishing an independent regulator. The same proposal has been made in football, and I think that is not off the table for the future, because the ECB has a promotion and also a regulatory role. And whether or not this is a key test to whether or not that should still remain the case. If they do not tackle racism, then you do have to question the long-term viability of the ECB itself.
So you'd call on government, would you, to be prepared now to withhold public money if progress is not sufficient?
I'd like to see public money withheld from cricket if the measures that the ECB come up with in terms of trying to ensure that racism, the scourge of racism, is removed from the game. If they fail to meet those targets, then there should be a stopping of public money to the game. Very simple. Longer term, if the ECB continues to fail in this area, and I believe there is will at the ECB, but if they don't achieve the targets that they set, then one may have to look at the possibility of legislation to establish an independent regulator, a little bit like the one that is proposed now in football.
So much of your conclusions, I'm sure, were based on the dramatic testimony by whistleblower Asim Rafiq. What would you say about his contribution to what feels like a watershed moment for the sport?
Yeah, I think he's to be commended for coming forward, for the honesty and the transparency of what he had to say. And also, I think he's shown a great deal of forgiveness, actually. I think if you or I had suffered some of the abuse and the racism and the experience, the prejudice and the career-ending racism that he has done, I think many of us would find it very difficult to forgive and forget. He's not forgetting, but he's got forgiveness then. He said, I think very commendably, he's even said that he would like to see international cricket once again at Yorkshire, which for me shows what a big man he actually is from this experience.
What did you think of the way that some in the game responded to what Asim Rafiq told you and indeed told the investigators at Yorkshire? Did you detect evidence of some kind of attempt to smear him?
I think there was evidence certainly of denial, but also there were certain smears as well that were communicated to the committee, which have not seemed to have had any foundation since. We have also seen, frankly, a reluctance amongst some to recognise that cricket has a problem. We've even had some rather, frankly, strange and bizarre comments by Ryan Sidebottom, who is currently employed at Yorkshire, that they needed to forget about the Rafiq incident. I will accept that he misspoke there, but at the same time, I think that that's the last source that you should find a comment like that coming from. Because frankly, the one thing Yorkshire does not need to forget about is this particular incident, because it needs to understand that there can't be any repetition of this, not if Yorkshire County Cricket Club in its current form wants to survive.
Yeah, I mean, Yorkshire's obviously paid a heavy price for this, losing all of its sponsors. There's been exodus, as you know. They've lost hosting rights, as you mentioned, reputationally, incredible harm. They've got a new chairman who I spoke to yesterday, in fact, Lord Patel. What do you make of the changes that he's already brought about there? Enough?
I think he's been a breath of fresh air. He clearly, with his heritage, but also his love for the game, he clearly takes it incredibly seriously and needs to be commended for his approach so far. When it comes to whether or not international cricket should be restored to Yorkshire, I'd say the jury is still out, mainly because there are still questions to be asked about the role of the Graves Trust in terms of the ownership structure at Yorkshire. It was pretty clear in the evidence that we received that they were a roadblock to changes that needed to happen. We can see that. And therefore, one has to ask whether or not the current structure at Yorkshire is quite the one that should be taking it forwards. Now, we will be having Lord Patel and the ECB in front of us in the coming weeks, and we want to explore that issue further because, let's be honest about this, no one wants to see Yorkshire County Cricket Club, the oldest cricket club, the most noble cricket club basically in Britain, one with a great reputation, one that's won more championships than any other, going under as a result of this scandal. But at the same time, there needs to be absolute confidence that everything, and I mean everything, is being done to ensure that this never happens again.
How do you see this whole episode? A watershed moment, a defining moment for the game that can be really a real crossroads for it, do you think?
Look, I love the game of cricket myself. I played it for 30 years rather badly. I'm chair at Lords of Commons Cricket Club. I had no idea of the scale of this problem. I'd never seen it in club cricket. And like many people, I was left dumbfounded and horrified by what Mr. Rafiq had to say. And I've been left further askance by what I've learned since. And many of the other whistleblowers have come forward to us. And clearly 4,000 complaints to ECB hotline shows this is a very serious endemic problem throughout the game of cricket. And I think without sorting out that problem, without getting to the bottom of it, without demonstrably proving that they are serious about sorting racism out in cricket, I really do wonder whether or not the game actually has much of a future in this country at all. So here's the challenge. Get it sorted. Make sure that everyone knows you're so doing. And then hopefully we can all enjoy a game that many of us love.
Well, some hard-hitting stuff there from Julian Knight. He's the DCMS chairman, speaking out about the report that followed the Azim Rafiq hearing. And I'll be getting reaction to that report from the ECB chief executive, Tom Harrison, who I caught up with earlier today for a wide-ranging discussion.
Well, I welcome the scrutiny here, Jonathan. As you know, we've obviously been through an exceptionally difficult few months where our game has been in the media for the wrong reasons. And tackling discrimination is the number one priority for us at ECB and across the game. We've launched a game-wide action plan across 12 different areas of work. And actually, I welcome the scrutiny from DCMS to be able to account for the progress that we're making. And it's obviously, and that being linked to funding is absolutely right and proper. But I'm very confident that we'll be able to demonstrate to DCMS how much progress is being made across the country in these very in these areas that matter so much to our ability to present the game as a game for everyone, which is a critical pillar of everything that we're trying to do. So it's going to be a busy few weeks, but a good one for us to be able to account for the progress that we've made.
The chairman of the committee says that racism is endemic across the whole of cricket. How many instances are you aware of players coming forward to report similar experiences to Rafiq?
Well, I mean, we've obviously we will await the findings of the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket, which will report later in 2022 around a broad range of areas of discrimination, but specifically race, class, and gender, and that will help us with. But we hope to be in a position before that report emerges where we've tackled an enormous amount of this through serious governance reform, through serious cultural reform in parts of the country where we are seeing significant issues. And be able to welcome recommendations coming out of the ICEC with a huge amount of progress in this space already.
Do you think it's a fair comment that racism is endemic across the whole of cricket? That's his comment.
Well, I'm not going to get into a debate about. We know from any instances of racism or any form of discrimination are bad enough. So let's just assume that we've got a serious problem to tackle. We are doing that, and we're doing it as a game in the right way. And I'm very confident, Jonathan, that in the not too distant future, through the work that's happening, we'll be able to become less of a sport that's being in the spotlight for issues around racism, towards being an exemplar of the kind of behaviours that promote social integration, understanding. And all of the great things, and we are all aware of a huge number of stories where that is the experience of most people playing cricket in our country, and not the more horrendous stories that we've heard of, and certainly that's my experience of the game, and I'm sure that over the coming months we'll be able to demonstrate massive progress in this space and ensure that some of the more positive elements of how cricket is building understanding between cultures, between faiths, is more the theme of the day rather than what we've been hearing over recent months.
Last couple, if I can. Rafiq said that he wants Yorkshire to host international cricket this summer. Now, clearly, that was an ECB decision to take it away. Do you agree with that? Do you think it's likely?
Well, we've got, as we said publicly, we are going to, the ECB board will be making a decision about 2022 and the Test match and One Day International that are due to be held in, or scheduled to be held at Headingley, originally scheduled to be held in Headingley. We're making a decision about at the end of January. There is a huge amount of work that's going in to ensure that the right information is being fed back to the ECB to enable them to make an effective decision. So look, I welcome Azim's comments, but we need to be really clear about the criteria that we set down and the extent to which Yorkshire County Cricket Club have made progress against that criteria.
You've got a lot on your plate, Tom, on all sorts of fronts. Do you personally have the appetite to take all this on?
Look, Aggers, you always have a lot on your plate in this job. It's a hugely privileged job. It's a hugely important one for for cricket fans to be able to hold me and the organisation I represent to account. We have had a hugely difficult few months, and I'm certainly not going to sit here and say anything other than that. It's been the most challenging time that I've been involved, and I've been in this role for 7 years. It's been really tough, but you know what? You get an opportunity to demonstrate how you respond in adversity, and that's what we need to do now, and it's what we have been doing for a number of weeks. But look, I won't say it's been comfortable, but I will say that it's super important that we get it right, and I'm massively motivated, and hopefully you can hear that, and massively motivated to get this right for the game and move forward in a hugely positive way, because I do believe that we can do that, and the game is together in that sentiment, I think.
George Dobell from the Cricketer, who's done much, obviously, to highlight the Rafiq case. Hello, George. Nice to have you with us.
Hello.
So there it is. What do you make of that report?
Well, just on that, the interview in general first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Has he been in the job since Thursday, or has he actually been there for 7 years? Well,
he has been there 7 years.
Well, he surely has to take a little bit of the blame, doesn't he? Responsibility for the fact that DCMS, for example, are saying that the ECB effectively turned a blind eye to the problems of inclusivity for years. He's been there 7 years.
It's a stinging report, isn't it? I mean, to talk about withholding government funding from the game. I mean, that's about as tough, I guess, as this committee could get.
Yeah, and asking them to report back every 3 months. Yeah. They're like a kid who's failing at school.
It's like going to see the headmaster.
Absolutely right. So they're saying, we don't trust you. You haven't done a decent job. So some of the things they're saying are extremely serious. The game was aware of an issue. Anyone involved in cricket should have been aware of the underlying racism throughout the game. Well, why haven't they done anything before now? Say again, he's been there 7 years.
So what does happen next? I mean, it was very strong to suggest that basically the whole game is racist in that report. Now, I did say to him, how many cases have there been, and he didn't answer that. But are you aware of there being a lot of cases, for instance, of and I'm talking about sort of county level here, really?
Yeah.
Of players, former players, coming forward and reporting things. I mean, are we talking 550, 500? I mean, do we know how many there have been?
Well, there have been 4,000 people talk to the Equity
on the help
Commission.
Line. Yeah.
And of the players or coaches that I've spoken to, I think the number I did count it's in the 60s of proper tangible complaints.
Yes.
Of people I've spoken to and recommended they speak to Cindy Butts.
I mean, I'm just picking up that phrase that the chairman used about racism being endemic in the whole game.
It depends
it's
how
a
you
big
define
statement.
that.
Yeah, that's a big statement.
But I would agree, actually. But it's a huge area to define exactly what you mean. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are using bad language and think they're better than other people. A lot of these things are systemic. I'll give you an example. So you asked what's going to happen next. The integrity unit of the ECB, I think, is going to charge people. I think they're going to charge 16 or so people quite soon, and that will be interesting. That will be a step forward. Do
you feel that things do have to happen quite quickly? I mean, did you feel that? I mean, I know we're here, but it just seems that there has been a bit of a lull. Well, perhaps waiting for this report, I guess.
Well, I think we should remember that Adil Rashid and Azim Rafiq first reported their concerns, I think it was in September 2017. Okay, and Yorkshire sprung into action in August 2018 with their first meeting on it. The PCA were told, the ECB were told, and actually it was only when the media dragged them kicking and screaming to do anything, which is why it's really welcome that the DCMS committee is doing this still, keeping the spotlight on it, making sure they do something. So that's very welcome. Other tangible things that could happen, is this racism? You tell me. When most children break into the county system, they are, so an 11-year-old kid shows some promise, they're invited to join the county system, they are then charged for coaching and kit. So at that very stage you are creating a barrier. That's not necessarily about race, but it's about class and wealth and all sorts of other things. It's not a huge amount of money there. You know what a tangible thing you could do right now? You could say Tom Harrison doesn't get his bloody bonus, and instead kids don't have the barrier to joining the county system. Tangible solution right there, morally right. It's absolutely reprehensible that the ECB can make 60-odd redundancies, be bottom of the World Test Championship, be endemically racist in the view of a parliamentary committee, and the chief executive, who's been there for 7 years, gets a big bonus.
Well, he would say that was an employment contract.
Well, it's a nonsense employment contract, and it's not the same as any other employment contract because it's a national governing body of our summer sport. And you have to be held to a different account.
Thank you very much indeed, George, for coming in. There we go, some honest opinions, some direct opinions, as always, from George Dobell at the Cricketer. So thank you for those.
This is the TMS podcast from BBC Radio 5 Live.
Azeem Rafiq himself has been giving his reaction to Rachel Burden and Rick Edwards on 5 Live Breakfast.
I'm encouraged by it. I think it shows how seriously the committee has taken the issue of racism, a lot more seriously than the cricket has for a very long time. I like the 2 recommendations. Hitting the cricket in the pocket is going to make a difference. And I think more importantly, ECB being held to account every quarterly is going to be a good move going forward.
Are you confident, in light of this report and everything that has happened in the last few months, that Yorkshire and other clubs and the ECB are committed to eradicating racism from the game?
I've seen steps from Yorkshire which encourages me. I feel like they're trying to move in the right direction. The other counties in the ECB, I'm not sure at this stage. There seems to be this attempt to throw the book at Yorkshire to try and make themselves look good. But clearly by the ECB Commission, this is a game-wide problem and everyone needs to come together and sort it out, really.
The report has said that the progress being made to tackle racism will be measured by indicators developed by the ECB. Are you concerned by that it's a case of the ECB kind of marking its own homework?
Yeah, look, I think the way I see it is that the committee is giving the ECB and the game one final chance to do the right thing. And if they don't do it, then they're going to come down hard on them. The one tangible change I'd like to see, which I'll be pushing for, is I don't think the ECB can be the regulators as well as the promoters of the game moving forward. As it's shown by my situation, doing both of them, it gets really confusing and it's just not good practice.
How disappointed were you with the words of Ryan Sidebottom, who's now a coach at Yorkshire, when he said that Yorkshire just need to forget about what's happened?
Yeah, look, obviously from my tweet, I was pretty annoyed by the words. I think it's important that we don't forget it. It's important that we learn from it, and that's really, if we forget it, then I think it'll happen again. I think it's really important that we use it as a learning point and really educate ourselves. We've all made mistakes, and it's important that we try and make amends for that.
Well, when you spoke to us back in November, you said you wanted to help others kind of become the voice of the voiceless. Do you think that players are now feeling more comfortable in speaking out about racism?
I think definitely more than a couple of months ago, but I still feel there seems to be this hesitancy, which is understandable because the system obviously tries to discredit, which has happened in my case as well, certain things behind the scenes, which have been quite outrageous, really. So it tries to, I feel like there was an attempt to try and scare everyone else that was planning to come out. But I think it's important that we keep encouraging people to speak, because when we start listening, that's the only way we can start moving forward.
How are you feeling about cricket more generally at the moment? Do you still enjoy watching the cricket, following the cricket? Are you watching the Ashes, for example?
Look, I have started to. I've watched a couple of games. It's been painful viewing, but look, I think it's important that the cricket continues to show that it wants to change, and hopefully, like I said, I can get back to and watching the game and loving the game that I've always have done throughout my life.
You told us again back in November that you wouldn't be teaching cricket to your kids, and you wouldn't want them to do something which left you, close to taking your own life. Can you see that changing?
Look, hopefully that's the hope. We all live in hope, don't we? But at this stage, it's not something that I've considered changing my view on. Like I said, I think from my point of view, I see Yorkshire trying to do the right thing, but I do feel like the game as a whole is still living in a lot of denial. And I think the ECB needs to do more, I would say, putting an action plan on a document. We've seen all that before. we need to see more action, and we will be a bit more impatient, I guess, as well.
Well, that was the former Yorkshire player Azim Rafiq. The Yorkshire chairman, Lord Patel, has been speaking to our sports editor, Dan Rowan, and Dan asked him how much change there's been since he came into his new position at the end of last year.
I think we've come so far in 8 weeks. It's almost, even I didn't believe we'd come that far. We've had incredible change. I've literally taken the club and turned it upside down and give it a good shake. You know, looking at our processes, our procedures, our leadership, our governance, you know, engaging with people, our pathways. There's nothing been, no stone left unturned, actually, in terms of what we're looking at.
You say giving it a shake. I mean, there's been a mass clear out, hasn't there, of staff. Tell me why that was necessary and how difficult you found having such a overhaul of personnel, many of whom I imagine have been here for quite some time and love this club.
But, you know, obviously I can't talk about individuals or you know, the processes there, but very difficult on a human level. Of course, these are difficult decisions. I fundamentally believe it was the right decision, that we needed to move forward and create a culture that was open, that was transparent, that people could come forward and feel comfortable in.
Has there been any complaints from any members of the playing staff towards you that they found that was excessive and unfair on certain people?
I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, you've come into an environment and made a huge seismic change. I'm at the beginning of that seismic change I talked about, and anybody, player, member of staff, will be concerned, anxious, looking at what's coming round. What I've done is made sure I've engaged, I've talked to people, I've communicated with everybody, from the guy who lets me in the morning to the best player we have, and I think that's helped people move forward. And I genuinely think there's a sense of excitement now, and people are settling down to the future.
Before we move on to some of the things that have been new to the club, just briefly, I know you can't go into names, but do you anticipate, or has there already been any legal action brought by some of those former employees who have been let go?
Again, I can't sort of comment on that. It's very early days at the moment. Yeah.
Why is Darren Gough the right man to help you lead this change as Director of Cricket?
We looked at a number of people. Obviously, we needed to bring somebody in very quickly. In terms of what I found in Darren, was somebody who was a hero, as a cricket hero, was captain of Yorkshire, but he brought that passion, that commitment, that real willingness to say, yes, I've been through this system, but it wasn't right, and I think things need to change, and I want it to change. He's felt it, he's been there, he's passionate, he's enthusiastic, he brings people with him, and I think it's been a phenomenal interim appointment. Obviously there's a year for him to prove that, but without a shadow of a doubt, and the players have taken to him as well, and so other members of the public, sponsors, it's been really good.
How difficult is it going to be for him and his coaches to prepare the players, given just how much upheaval there's been before the start of the season?
I think the players have now got in a routine of practicing and engaging. We've had some interim freelance people who have not applied for the substantive jobs. Darren and I both are absolutely over the moon. So, we've advertised for a number of jobs, coaches and some medical training staff. We have over 200 applications from across the world in that short space of time. So it's been an enormous job to, we're going through an open, transparent process. We're marking against skills, criteria, expertise. Nobody's picking anybody. We're independently looking at this as well. But I'm so excited that we've got, this huge number of phenomenal people applying that want to come to Yorkshire.
One of the men that has come in, Ryan Sidebottom, apologised this week for suggesting that what's happened here should be forgotten. What's your response to that? And what guarantees can you give to people that this won't just be forgotten or brushed under the carpet in some way?
Well, I think when you were here last time, Dan, I think one of my biggest comments was, yes, we've got to move forward, but there's no way you can forget what's happened, because that's the foundations on which we build and move forward. And look, we're going to have missteps on the way. This is never going to be perfect, but the fact that he apologised, he understood, he learned, he spoke to Azim, apologised and learned. I think that's what's important now, that people can feel comfortable to say, I got that wrong, sorry, I didn't understand. Can I learn from it and can I move forward? It's got to be a learning environment and culture.
And I've noticed there has been some questioning of whether or not Darren and Ryan and Steve Harmison represent enough of a change, represent symbolically, do they represent symbolically what needs to happen to this club to convince people that it's open to all? You're confident they are the right individuals, are you?
No, I mean, if you look at, we've advertised
These are just interim,
for 5 or 6 coaches. What we needed to do in the space of a few days is have a number of freelance coaches who could walk into here, sure, who understand the environment and who could deliver rapidly for a few weeks.
What is the financial situation that you face here at Headingley, Mr. Chairman, and how crucial is it that you regain international hosting rights as quick as possible?
I mean, for me, my sole focus, besides, dealing with all the issues that we have to deal with, is making sure international matches are returned here as soon as possible, because everything rests on that in terms of our future sponsors, our sustainability plan, our business plan, and the hundreds of thousands of fans that want to see Test cricket here. It's absolutely crucial.
And how confident are you that you will achieve that in time for this summer? Because you're meant to be hosting a Test match, aren't you, here in June?
In June, absolutely. So 24/7, myself and a number of people here are just working to meet the criteria we've been set, and I'm very confident that we will meet the criteria that we've been set, and I hope we're beyond that as well. But look, it was right for the ECB to sanction us. It was right for the governing body to hold us to account. We need to prove to everybody, the ECB, the DCMS, Select Committee, we need the Equality and Human Rights Commission, hold us to account. We're delivering, we're changing, and we will get there.
Sounds like you're hopeful. Fair description, hopeful?
I have to. There's no other option in my head. I have to be hopeful, and I have to be more than hopeful. I have to be very confident.
In time for this summer, you mean?
Absolutely.
And what would it mean if you didn't get it back? What's the harm? What's the damage that would do to the Yorkshire cricketing public?
I think you could look at that in several ways. I think it would damage cricket. Want us to remember, this is the biggest county cricket club in the world. We are bigger than Australia and New Zealand put together. So the hundreds of thousands of people who love cricket, who will miss that opportunity, they'll be deprived of that. And financially, there's no question it will be a huge financial crisis.
What are the sponsors saying to you right now? Are they pleased with the changes you're making? Do you sense that some of them are ready to come back, or already in talks with you about coming back?
I'm certainly talking to sponsors. I think many will return. I think they're seeing very positive moves. I think they want to be associated with an institution that's done so much to tackle the scourge of discrimination, and is looking positive and forward.
And I noticed that Azim Rafiq has said today that he wants hosting rights to be restored here. How welcome was that, and how important could it be, do you think, his comment?
If it wasn't for Azim, the world of cricket and sport wouldn't be looking at this really important issue. So hats off to him, his bravery to do this. I'm not sure I'd have been brave enough to go to the extent where he's gone. We've always had a very clear relationship. He was very clear. You talk a lot, fine, let me see you walking, and if you do, I'll support you. I never want to see this club damaged. I don't want to see individuals damaged. If you're doing the right thing, I'll back you. If you veer from the path, I'll be coming back. And I'm so heartened to see that today.
Have the ECB confirmed to you, Mr. Chairman, that Yorkshire won't be relegated as punishment for all this from the county championship?
I think the ECB's give us the sanctions in terms of international matches. The issue about points or divisions is up to the Cricket Disciplinary Committee that's conducting its investigation now. So that will be a separate independent review.
So you still don't know which division we're playing in next season?
As far as I know, we're in Division 1 and we're going to start. That's as far as I know.
But there could be a points deduction. We're waiting on that.
We're waiting on that.
Yeah. Tell me about some of the other changes you're making here in terms of governance, for example, and the independent directors, fan representation.
Yeah. So we've, governance processes were absolutely important. And we had to bring in independent experts in working alongside us. So we brought in the Good Governance Institute and Howard Kennedy Legal Partners to come in and take a root and branch look at everything that we're doing. And as a result of that, and as a result of us wanting to, be transparent and open, you may have seen, we've advertised for 6 independent directors against a very strict skills matrix. People who reflect the population we serve, and we're in the process of headhunters are recruiting them at the moment, and hopefully early February there'll be some movement.
That sounds like progress to many, I'm sure. Your predecessor, Mr. Chairman, Roger Hutton, said, didn't he, to MPs and indeed to myself, that his hands had been tied somewhat when he wanted to make changes by the way that this club is set up and financed, by the Colin Graves Trust, because you can only remove a director from the board with the consent of the trust, and that was something which was focused on during those hearings. Will any of these changes affect that situation?
I think the whole governance review and the processes will probably look at every aspect of it, including the Graves Trust. But I must say at the outset, I've had nothing but support from the trustees of the Graves Trust. They've been, and I've been as transparent and open with them as I've been to everybody in this building.
So they haven't blocked you in any way?
Not at all.
Tell me about the hotline and the latest on that. How many people have come forward via the hotline?
The hotline is the first thing we set up because we wanted to hear people and curate a safe space for that to happen. We've had around 50 sort of responses to the hotline, and that have been currently independently investigated by Mo Sefi, the QC. And I suppose, you sort of compare that with the potential 4,000 that are here are going through the ECB's committee. This is not just a Yorkshire problem, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely. Given that, and given the 12-point action plan that the ECB came up with before the end of the year, are you one of those who thinks there's merit in the idea of an independent cricket regulator?
I think that's probably a discussion that I'd spent an hour talking to you. I've chaired 4 regulators in my lifetime with respect to health and social care and social work. So I think there's lots of differences in terms of the type of regulator you may want. So I think one has to think through that process really, very carefully.
Yeah. I noticed that Azim also said today that we need to show a bit of love and compassion now. He seems to me, he said, that those apologising for offensive remarks are the ones being punished. And I think he was referring to David Lloyd in particular, and obviously he's left Sky. Were you saddened, like he appears to be, that he left Sky? And do you think that perhaps it's time to sort of draw a line under some of the things that have been said in the past and forgive and move on? Are people being perhaps unfairly penalised for things in the past?
Yeah. Ultimately, I'm a social worker by profession. I always believe that you need to work with people, you need to take people on the journey and education. And if people understand, are remorseful and can move on and learn, that's what this is about for all of us in Yorkshire.
He says it seems outside the county everyone wants to throw the book at Yorkshire. My concern is that some want to do that in order to make themselves look better. I guess that's what your point earlier you were getting at, is that this is not just about this club. This is about a much wider societal issue that needs to be tackled.
Clearly, this is not just a Yorkshire problem. This is a cricket-wide problem. Azim Rafiq was here. He could have been anywhere. But Azim Rafiq's only come once in a lifetime. And I think we just have to use that once in a lifetime opportunity to really make a difference and a change. It is a once in a generation opportunity to make a change, and we need to do that.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.